Discover the incredible moment. A rancher's surprising answer revealed her hidden truth at last. The sun dipped low in the Texas sky, painting the horizon with strokes of orange and crimson, mirroring the fire that blazed within Sarah O'Brien. Ranching was etched into her very being, each calloused hand a testament to her dedication to the land that had been passed down through generations. Yet, as the ranch stood resilient under the approaching threat of an affluent developer, a storm brewed inside her, a whirlwind of doubt and confusion that threatened to eclipse her world. Would she merely safeguard their legacy, or dare to step out of the suffocating expectations and embrace the truth that lay buried within her? The news hit like a bolt of lightning. The developer's intentions drew lines in her mind, creating a rift between loyalty to her family and her own ambitions. A luxury resort on Greenwood Ranch felt absurd, a betrayal to the acres of grass that sang under the wind and the livestock that regarded her as kin. Her father's love enveloped the ranch, losing it would mean losing her very essence. Yet beneath her fierce pride was fear. Would she forever be measured only by her role as a rancher? The very core of her being trembled at the idea of stepping away from what was known, as uncertainty clawed at her heart. A chance encounter with her old professor at the county fair ignited a flicker of hope. He'd always seen the potential buried in her knowledge of sustainable practices, urging her to be bold. Each word drummed against her heart, calling her to recognize that the legacy of the Greenwood Ranch didn't have to be steeped solely in tradition. A brilliant vision sprouted, infused with purpose. She could protect the land through ecological wisdom, breathing new life into her family's heritage while preserving it for generations to come. Thoughts raced in her mind like wild mustangs, her dreams of rejuvenating the land filling her with conviction. But self-doubt lingered, a murky shadow cast by her respect for familial expectations. Before she could settle into this newfound sense of direction, she unearthed a heart-wrenching discovery: her father's letter revealing a clandestine alliance with environmental advocates 2 decades prior. That tremor of blood pulsed through her veins, igniting confusion and disbelief. Her father envisioned a sanctuary, much different from the rigid notion of a ranch she had clung to, and it crumbled her preconceptions. Clenching the paper in her hand, she felt dizzy. He wasn't just a rancher. He was an architect of balance, an environmental steward hidden beneath the mantle of tradition. As she steeled herself for the forthcoming confrontation at the town's community hall, the walls felt as though they were closing in. Would the town rally behind her to safeguard their shared history, or would she be cast out for choosing a path many would deem radical? A determined resolve clashed with the weight of her family's legacy. The silence in the hall weighed heavily on her, a tangible entity that seemed to mock her indecision. The pressure built to an unbearable crescendo. This was not merely about the ranch or the legacy her father created, but a battle to claim her own voice. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The moment arrived. A noisy buzz of anticipation prickled her skin, a forest of eyes studying her every move. Doubt pounded against her chest like a drum. To speak or to remain silent. Her heart danced between pride and fear, illustrating the battlefield she never knew existed within. The pivotal decision pressed upon her fiercely, each tick of the clock resonating through her in desperate pulses. Would she choose the conventional path, honoring her father's image and the pressing expectations for family loyalty? Or would she take a stand rooted in the truth she had finally unearthed, risking it all? The moment she had to decide lingered, suffocatingly close. What kind of legacy would she forge? The ground beneath her felt both solid and treacherous, as she squared her shoulders, ready to face the unknown. The heat of the moment clung to Sarah like a second skin, its intensity almost blinding. She could feel every heartbeat, each thud reminding her of the expectation looming over her shoulders. The room, filled with familiar faces, suddenly felt like a courtroom, a space where her authenticity would be put on trial. For years, she had lived under the weight of her family's expectations. Today, she could either shed that weight or embrace its suffocating embrace. Her mind raced. Visions of her father's gentle hands guiding her through the fields intertwined with images of his letter revealing a world of advocacy for their land, a world she had unknowingly yearned for. It dawned on her that perhaps he had not aimed to confine her to the role of a rancher but instead to prepare her for something greater. He wanted her to choose a legacy brimming with possibility rather than one starved of it. The thought ignited a flicker of defiance deep within her. Taking a deep breath, Sarah reminded herself of the sustainable practices her professor had once urged her to embrace. What if she dared voice the vision she now harbored? Allowing the connection to her past to live alongside her hopes for the future could form a bridge to her community. She was just as much a part of Greenwood Ranch as its sprawling fields, but she could redefine what that meant. It was time to plant her flag in the soil of progressiveness. The moment felt fragile but electric as she opened her mouth. Her voice, though steady, trembled with the audacity of her resolve. I stand here today not only as a rancher but as someone committed to preserving and rejuvenating the land we all cherish. My father never saw this ranch as a cage but as the heart of a greater purpose. A subtle shift in the room hinted at her impact. Some leaned in, others frowned, confusion grappling with intrigue. Her words began to flow, unearthing the depth of her intentions. She spoke of the climate crisis pressing down on all ranchers, emphasizing that sustainability could offer them both a means of survival and a legacy worthy of sharing with generations. As she outlined her vision, a harmonious blend of heritage and innovation, her confidence solidified. This was not just another meeting, it was a defining moment in her trajectory, but with each conviction, she felt the stones of doubt begin to shift beneath her feet. Voices from her peers peppered her thoughts, questions challenging her vision swirling through the air. Is she abandoning tradition? Where does that leave us? Their skepticism, while disheartening, served as fuel to intensify her fire. She saw herself in their shoes just as they had seen her. They too wrestled with loyalty, identity, and survival. Change is daunting, she conceded, acknowledging the fear that gnawed at their hearts. But standing still is a choice just as much as moving forward. If we do not adapt, we risk losing everything we have worked for. Together, we can cultivate a future that honors both our roots and our responsibility to the land. As she closed her eyes, envisioning a future where the ranch thrived in harmony with nature rather than at odds with it, she felt a resilience blossoming inside her. If her father had seen a world that stretched beyond walls and existing paradigms, so could she. The echo of the crowd faded. She was not just speaking to them but also to the very essence of the ranch and its future. With the tension thickening in the air, Sarah took a bold step forward. The time has come to face our choices. Will we let fear dictate our legacy, or will we embrace the responsibility to innovate and protect our home? As Sarah faced her community, the hard-earned courage coursing through her veins bolstered her resolve. She had unearthed not just her own truth but a challenging path toward collaboration and mutual growth. Yet the result lay on a precipice. Friends or foes might emerge, and the repercussions of her gamble loomed heavy. Just then, she caught sight of a familiar face in the back of the hall, a face that triggered the chilling realization. It was the developer's representative, a figure ready to negotiate or possibly undermine everything she had just stood for. Her heart raced, caught between the fear of confrontation and the thrill of her newfound voice. Would she be able to hold her ground against the looming threat? This conflict had only just begun. The spotlight felt unbearably hot, but Sarah's focus shifted solely to the figure at the back of the hall. The developer's representative, a polished man with a clipboard, exuded a calculated coolness that made her stomach twist. She had anticipated resistance, but this was more than just skepticism. It was a direct threat to everything she had just fought to articulate. As murmurs broke out among her peers, Sarah recalled the fear she had felt before, the way it had once paralyzed her. This time, however, it stoked a determination that took shape within her, reminding her of the countless late nights spent poring over case studies on sustainable practices. The knowledge she had gained was her armor. She would not shrink back into the shadows. Confronting her fear meant confronting him. She locked eyes with the developer, and for a heartbeat, time hung suspended. The challenge buzzing in the air felt electric. The voices around her faded to a dull hum, and she centered herself on the truth she had just embraced. "Are you here to oppose the future I just laid out for us?" Sarah asked, her voice sharper than she intended but fueled by conviction. The words rolled out like a gale, unsettling the crowd once more. The tension metamorphosed into a charged silence, waiting for the man's response. "I'm here to help you preserve what you have," he replied smoothly, the hint of a smirk betraying his true agenda. "But that requires understanding the reality of land value. What you propose could devalue your family's legacy." The challenge sparked a fury in Sarah. She could feel the truth welling inside her, a force pushing her beyond fear. "You say that you want to help, but your vision is rooted in profit rather than preservation. My father taught me that land is not just an asset, it is a living entity that nourishes us. By disregarding that, you derail our legacy." The murmurs in the room shifted, some looked startled, while others nodded slowly. Was that defiance she detected in their eyes? Even amid the confrontation, she felt a surge of relief that her voice could carry the weight of their shared history. She was not alone in this. "You think you can just upend decades of tradition with lofty ideals about sustainability?" The developer countered, eyebrows raised. "This is a business, and being innovative doesn't just mean being idealistic. Your plan will require investment and a change in operations, not just speeches." "That's just it," Sarah responded, her confidence solidifying with each word. "This isn't merely about funding, it's about fostering a culture that values the land and its future over immediate profits. The choice we face is transformative yet stark. It's not an accessory to our ranch, it's our lifeblood." The intensity in her voice amplified, resonating with pieces of herself she had only recently begun to uncover. The collective awareness seemed to pulse in the audience, her words rippling through the room. With each passing second, she felt less like a lone voice lost in the crowd and more like a spearhead of a movement rooted in authenticity. But then her gaze flickered back to the developer. There was something calculated in his posture, a hint that he had anticipated this confrontation. "Let's make a deal," he said, a glimmer of something sinister flashing in his eyes. "If you can gather support from the others, perhaps we can explore avenues for collaboration. But should they side with doubt or with me, I can assure you, the future will be less forgiving." The ultimatum hung cold and sharp, a dagger of uncertainty she hadn't seen coming. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, but beneath that fire lay a deeper unease. Her inner voice clamored, questioning the loyalty of her community as she imagined their divided allegiances morphing into real consequences. Sarah inhaled sharply. Each decision ahead would shape not just her future but the legacy of the ranch, the very essence of her father's legacy twisted into a perilous bind. Then let the gathering decide. As she stepped back, a wave of doubt washed over her. Did she have enough allies among the ranchers to withstand this storm? The clock was ticking down to a new reckoning, and her heart raced as the stakes rose high. Would she emerge from this conflict unbroken, or would she find herself swept away in a tide of betrayal and loss? As uncertainty loomed, an undeniable question flashed through her mind: would she be strong enough to turn her newfound courage into action when it mattered most? The tension hung thick, a palpable weight resting squarely on Sarah's shoulders. As she walked away from the developer's glare, her mind spiraled into contemplation. Was it too late to rally support? Her colleagues had always appeared supportive, but clouds of doubt loomed in her heart like stormy weather. She could almost hear the whispers echoing in the vast emptiness of the hall. Would they stand beside her or drift toward the promise of quick profits? In this moment, Sarah realized she was not just fighting against a developer, she was battling years of inherited skepticism about change. People always hesitated to revolt against what they knew, regardless of whether it suffocated their future. This was her father's ranch. It had been his dream, but those dreams had to evolve with the times. She had to ensure his legacy would not perish silently alongside the traditional practices that had chained them for too long. She maneuvered to the side of the stage, seeking refuge within the shadows. It startled her to see her hands trembling as she fought to keep her composure. Was this panic? Defeat? Or was it merely the adrenaline still surging through her system? She clenched her fists, reminding herself of the fire ignited by the developer's veiled threats. This was a call to action. Swiftly, she took out her notebook and pen, an instinct as familiar as breathing. Ideas swam into focus through the chaotic whirl of anxiety, each potential strategy like a rushing stream waiting to find its course. She began writing, crafting a plan to canvass support among her peers. It wasn't a road paved with easy answers, but it had to start somewhere. The initial words came out hesitantly, almost like a conversation with herself. Preparation is key. I have to educate them. The thought settled like a stone in her mind, solidifying her purpose. But then a harder question intruded: how? Gathering supporters required more than just rational arguments, it required an emotional connection back to the land they cherished. Remembering moments spent with her father flooding into her mind, a warm autumn afternoon, hands stained with soil from planting seeds, the wiser words he had shared as they watched the sun stretch across the horizon. Those were the resonant stories that could break through apathy. As she wrote, her resolve became clearer. She would arrange a series of informal meetings to share insights about sustainable practices, inviting ranchers to voice their apprehensions and perspectives. Each session could become not only an information share but a gathering of courage, a place to explore how they could all adapt together. This community had shaped her, and it would take their collaboration to reshape their future, but intermingled within that budding optimism was a growing fear about the developer's ultimatum. Would they see her as a threat? Would they feel the burdens of doubt he cast upon them? Pushing those apprehensions aside, she shifted her perspective, reminding herself of the risk that came with every decision. To stand idle was to invite stagnation. With each scribbled note, she uncovered a bit more confidence, pulling her armor tighter. She was not the scared girl she once was, she was her father's daughter, drawn from the very earth he had loved. Suddenly, a figure materialized at the entrance of the hall. It was Mark, one of the more influential ranchers, setting an apprehensive gaze in her direction. Her heart raced. Would he approach with skepticism or curiosity? His strides were purposeful, determination etched in the crease of his brow. As he drew nearer, Sarah couldn't ignore the unsettling portent he represented. His unwavering influence could just as easily galvanize support or succumb to the allure of profit. "Sarah," he began cautiously, "I heard some of what transpired. We need to talk." Her breath hitched, and the stakes surged higher. Would he align with her mission, or would he betray her trust? As he stepped closer, their futures intertwined in that moment, a dizzying realization settled in: she would either discover allies within her community or find herself fighting a battle she could lose alone. The path ahead remained uncertain, heavy with the weight of what was to come. Would she be strong enough to galvanize change amidst the encroaching doubts? Everything was on the line, but perhaps, just perhaps, this was the catalyst she needed to uncover deeper truths about herself and her community. As he spoke, she braced herself for what lay ahead, compelled to confront whatever revelations awaited them both. What secret alliances would emerge, and how would they redefine the future of the ranch? "Sarah, I've been hearing mixed opinions about the development proposal," Mark stated, his voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of uncertainty. "Honestly, I came here to see where you stand. Your father always spoke highly of you, and we need to keep his legacy alive." Mark had just opened a door that Sarah felt hesitant to step through. This was her opportunity. An influential rancher like him could sway others, but it also meant she had to expose her vulnerabilities. Would he dismiss her ideas as naive? "I believe we need to change," Sarah replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "The ranching industry is evolving, and I think we can adapt without sacrificing what we value." She saw a flicker of interest in his eyes. "What do you propose?" he asked, cautiously leaning forward. A surge of energy coursed through her. She had rehearsed this pitch over and over in her mind. "I want to introduce sustainable practices to our ranching techniques. If we band together, we can create a model that preserves the land and enhances profitability." His brow furrowed slightly. Sustainability sounds good in theory, but the truth is he hesitated. Many around here are entrenched in traditional methods. It's hard to push back against generations of skepticism. A knot formed in her stomach. Was he steering her away or pushing her forward? I know it's daunting. But I think it's our responsibility to try. We owe it to the future, to our families. Mark regarded her, his eyes weighing her earnestness. And what if it fails? What if people don't want to change? Suddenly, Sarah felt the wind shift, a profound realization dawning on her. Mark's questions mirrored her own fears. If we do nothing, we risk losing everything, she asserted, her voice firm. This isn't just about making profits, it's about survival. But I can't convince everyone on my own. I need allies like you. He paused, clearly considering her plea. In that silence, she recognized this was a pivotal moment. If she was to fight alongside Mark, she needed to articulate the emotional core of her mission. Do you remember your father's stories? She ventured, leaning closer. How he fought against the drought that threatened his first harvest. He didn't back down. We need to embrace that tenacity. We're the guardians of this land, just as he was. We can transform fear into resilience. Mark's gaze softened, the walls built around his skepticism beginning to crack. You're channeling your father's spirit. That's powerful. But I can't do it alone, she pressed. You have a voice here. You have influence. If you stand with me, perhaps others will listen. Not just to make a profit, but to understand we're all in this together. His expression shifted, a hint of intrigue drawing across his features. Okay, he finally said. Let us set up a meeting, but you need to prepare a solid argument. People will challenge you. Relief washed over her, tempered by the awareness that the real battle was just beginning. I will, she promised, a swell of determination rising within her. As they exchanged contact information and established a tentative timeline for their first gathering, Sarah felt a fragile optimism buoy up against the encroaching shadows of doubt. She could feel the synapses firing within her. This was no longer just a plan, but a mission. Each meeting they held would be a step toward resilience, yet, nerves tightened her chest again. Would enough ranchers embrace this change? What if Mark's support wavered? The stakes were high, and with every positive encounter, the fear of failure felt more palpable. She needed to anticipate pushback, opposition, anything that might derail her vision. Still, instinctively, she also felt stronger. Clarity came through their shared dialogue. This was how she could lead a transformation, not as a solo crusader, but as a collaborator willing to meet others where they were willing to engage. But as she left the hall, one thought gnawed at her. What if she encountered resistance that even Mark couldn't overcome? Would that drive her deeper into despair or propel her toward even more audacious solutions? With new revelations swirling in her mind, she had to prepare herself for the unpredictable road that lay ahead. Would she have the strength to rise above her fears and confront her community's deeply rooted doubts? The next challenge awaited, but the answer lay within the dialogues yet to come. As she steeled herself for this uncharted territory, Sarah wondered who else might stand in her corner and at what cost she would have to pursue this battle. The weeks passed, and Sarah's resolve to advocate for sustainable ranching practices transformed into a frantic sprint for preparation. Each day blurred together in a whirlwind of data analysis, consultations, and presentations. The initial flicker of optimism she had felt began to glow brighter as she put together a compelling argument, but the shadow of doubt loomed large, constantly whispering fears of inadequacy. Research laid bare the hard truths. Many ranchers had resisted change for decades, arguing that sustainability was an urban ideal, detached from the realities of their rugged lives. She gritted her teeth, recognizing the need to confront these rebuttals head-on. Sarah immersed herself in the narratives of successful transitions in neighboring counties, eager to provide tangible examples that would resonate within the community. Yet, doubts nagged at her. What if the stories failed to capture their attention? What if Mark's presence was not enough? She kept her focus sharp, rehearsing her pitch endlessly. Each time she stood in front of the mirror, she practiced confronting imaginary skeptics who recited objections. It's too risky, they snarl. Those methods don't work here. She countered with facts, armed with statistics about soil health, water conservation, and increased yields tied to regenerative farming. As she prepared her narrative, a flash of realization struck her. She wasn't just advocating for change, she was forging a new identity for herself as a leader. The journey from the shadows of her father's legacy into the forefront of an evolving industry felt daunting but invigorating. Slowly, she began to understand that her fear wasn't merely tied to her proposal, it was tied to the responsibility of filling her father's shoes, the weight of expectation that felt both a privilege and a burden. One evening, her phone vibrated, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Mark, suggesting they meet before the gathering. She felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Was he rethinking his support, or did he want to strategize? At the meeting, Sarah found his demeanor unexpectedly attentive as he delved into the substance of her proposed arguments. "You've done a lot of homework," he complimented, his expression a study in thoughtfulness. Encouraged, she offered her insights excitedly, discussing the impact of sustainable grazing on the environment and profits. Mark nodded, but Sarah sensed an invisible line hovering between them. She could feel that he, too, was wrestling with the implications of opposing entrenched beliefs. "Here's the thing, Sarah," he said finally, his voice low and serious. "This whole thing hinges on trust. You'll need to convince them not just of the benefits but to trust you, to trust this vision. A lot of these folks, well, they dismiss you as the city girl talking about practices they've never tried." The weight of his words sunk in, shaking her confidence. Trust felt like a currency too fragile in this setting. Was she ready to be the face of this initiative? She had to confront her fear both in herself and in the ranching community. It wouldn't be enough to present facts, she had to connect with their hearts and fears, to show them the human side of transformation. "Maybe that's part of the pitch," she proposed thoughtfully. "Not just the data but sharing personal stories. I can talk to them about my family, how my father worked this land, to show them that this isn't just a job for me, it's personal." "Good instinct." Mark leaned back, folding his arms as he weighed her idea. "But prepare yourself for the blowback, too. It won't be an easy conversation." The mention of blowback gripped her with a visceral sense of impending confrontation. This would test her abilities like never before, but she recognized that growth only flourished through adversity. She would have to connect deeply with the community she sought to serve, but the prospect of facing their skepticism was as daunting as it was thrilling. As Sarah left their meeting, determination coursed through her veins. She realized that to be an effective advocate, she had to venture into the uncomfortable space of vulnerability. But what if she did share her story and it was met with indifference or worse, mockery? Preparation intensified as she practiced relentless empathy, drawing from her own history to create a connection. Still, the thought of facing a room full of skeptical ranchers loomed large in her mind. Tomorrow was the day. The moment where she'd either begin to carve her own path or find herself lost amid the shadows of doubt. Could she rise to become a beacon of change, or would she falter when faced with the challenge of reinforcing bonds and nurturing trust? The sun rose with a resolute glow, casting golden hues over the sprawling ranches as Sarah drove down the familiar, dusty road. Each bump and dip rattled her nerves but also ignited a flicker of excitement within her. Today was not just a presentation, it represented a pivotal moment that would define her future and her family's legacy. She could feel the weight of history pressing down on her, the whispers of her father still lingering in the air. As she parked and stepped out of the car, she could sense a mix of anticipation and anxiety radiating from the people arriving at the designated meeting space. The familiar figures of ranchers lined the drive, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. This wasn't simply about data, it was about building a bridge to a community often resistant to change. Walking in, she took a moment to steady her breathing amidst the cacophony of distant chatter. The room was filled with the sound of boots shifting on the wooden floor, and she could feel eyes assessing her. Murmurs echoed her insecurities, and she instantly questioned if she belonged in this arena. It was time to face the audience not as the city girl but as someone with a tangible connection to their world. "All right, here goes," she whispered to herself, clutching the notes she had prepared. Each step toward the front felt momentous, but as she stood before them, she was struck by an overwhelming need to ground her argument in something deeper: a shared humanity. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice steady as she surveyed the ranchers' faces. "I'm excited to share some concepts about sustainable ranching. But first, I want to tell you about my father." The room fell silent, curiosity piqued. This was the moment she had envisioned, yet it also terrified her. She wasn't just recounting facts, she was about to unveil the story of her family, her roots in this very soil, and why it mattered now more than ever. She recounted tales of long evenings spent under the stars, listening to her father's wisdom about the land, the cycles of growth, the importance of nurturing the ecosystems that had fed their family for generations. It wasn't just about ranching for profit, it was about raising a family, preserving a way of life. That's what drove my father. As she shared her personal connection, she could see the shift in the room. The skeptical gazes softened, and she felt a flicker of hope ignite. "I realize that some of you might see these new practices as foreign, perhaps risky. But I want to show you that adapting to change doesn't mean abandoning tradition. It can mean building on it." She presented her research, weaving both emotional and factual narratives, feeling more assertive with each passing moment. The statistics were important, but it was the stories that created resonance. In neighboring counties, ranchers who embraced regenerative practices found not only environmental benefits but also financial gains. Families thrived because they embraced methods that honored the land. Yet, a critical voice interrupted her narrative. "But how can we trust this will work here?" The question sliced through the atmosphere like a blade, biting and accusatory. Sarah felt her heart race. Doubt threatened to creep back in. "That's a fair concern," she acknowledged, locking eyes with the man who spoke. "Trust is earned, and I can't provide guarantees. All I can offer is my commitment to this community, my willingness to stand alongside you as we explore these options together." Mark's earlier warning flickered back into her mind: the importance of building trust. Would they hear her? Did they see her not as an outsider but as an ally willing to fight for their future? Moments passed as she gauged reactions, and she braced herself for resistance. Instead, hands shot up around her, questions flooding in, some challenging, others reflective. The dialogue that unfolded felt electric, a shared exploration rather than a one-sided presentation. As the meeting progressed into a vibrant discussion, she sensed the walls around the ranchers beginning to crack. Each debate only served to refine her understanding of their concerns, pushing her to articulate solutions more clearly, to weave their fears into her narrative. Each inquiry exposed a deeper layer of their reluctance but also revealed a spark of curiosity. Finally, as the discussion wound down, one rancher, a seasoned veteran whose weathered face had hitherto remained stoic, nodded slowly. "Maybe we have something to learn from you yet, Sarah," he conceded. "Let us see where this can take us." A swell of hope surged within her, but so did a gnawing uncertainty. The seed of trust might have been planted, yet cultivating it was far from over. Leaving the meeting, she felt both exhilaration and the weight of unresolved questions. She was beginning to feel part of this fabric, but would their initial openness sustain under the strain of reality? Was she ready for the challenges that would inevitably arise both from the ranchers and the land itself? The path forward seemed daunting, but Sarah was determined. She stepped into the evening, invigorated but aware of the complexities that lay ahead. Would she be able to nurture this budding trust through the inevitable trials of change, or would the shadows of doubt return to cloud her vision once more? As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting long shadows over the ranch, Sarah walked to her car with a sense of accomplishment nagged by uncertainty. She had initiated a dialogue, something more profound than she could have hoped for, but now the weight of the next steps pressed heavily on her shoulders. Conversations flooded her mind, questions, challenges, and the burden of expectations that had shifted with the rancher's cautious interest. Sarah plopped into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel as though it were a lifeline. "This is only the beginning," she muttered softly, trying to quell the whirlpool of anxiety. She felt exhilarated but confused by the rawness of the experience. Would they remember her words when faced with the realities of change? Doubt snaked its way into her thoughts, challenging her resolve. Driving home, the familiar landscape blurred past her, an unsettling reminder of how fast reality could shift. She was aware that her relationship with these ranchers was delicate. Trust had been extended, but it was on her to amplify that trust with tangible results. She needed a plan. It was one thing to inspire a conversation, it was another entirely to lead a visual change. Arriving home, she spread out her father's old maps of the ranch on the kitchen table. Pencil in hand, she traced the lines of property boundaries, studying their markings like a roadmap to her new commitments. She needed to demonstrate, to provide concrete evidence that adopting new practices could yield real benefits. Let us start small, she thought, jotting down ideas for pilot projects that could be feasible with minimal risk. Rotational grazing, cover crops, soil testing, each method was a seed she could plant in the minds of the ranchers. If they could see the success firsthand, perhaps the larger migration toward sustainability wouldn't feel so intimidating. As she sketched out her concepts, Sarah's pulse quickened with anticipation. This was her realm now, blending science with sentiment. However, a sense of apprehension lingered. Some ranchers held years of skepticism built from watching outsiders flounder in their world. How could she prove that she was different? Then, unexpectedly, the memory of the seasoned rancher's nod echoed in her mind. Maybe we have something to learn from you yet. That glimmer of acceptance fueled her determination. She had the potential to build something strong here. Her early connections, however tenuous, could flourish, but as she immersed herself in planning, doubt surfaced again. Was she overstepping, seeking too quickly to implement change without fully grasping their fears? The question gnawed at her tenacity. She would need to address those fears, to ensure this path forward would be a partnership, not a unilateral decision. The following days were spent in relentless pursuit of knowledge, discussions with Mark, research into similar ranch models, gathering data that highlighted both risks and benefits of sustainable practices. Each conversation brought insights, but still, she wrestled with the nagging fear of rejection. She needed to confront that fear head-on. She would not allow past assumptions to dictate her future. At her next meeting with the ranchers, she would start with a fresh initiative, inviting them to explore the pilot projects together. She envisioned an open space where concerns could be voiced freely, a workshop setting that encouraged collaboration rather than debate. The challenge would be convincing them of the benefits before anything was put into action. The morning of the new meeting dawned with a blend of excitement and anxiety. It felt surreal to be on the cusp of this pivotal step, extending an olive branch of cooperation while navigating the tightly held traditions ingrained in the community. Would they embrace the proposed collaboration, or would doubts re-emerge, obstructing any forward movement? As she stood at the door, she took a moment to center herself, grounding her thoughts. This was more than a meeting, it was an opportunity to merge her vision with their experience. If she could create a space where everyone felt valued, perhaps they could redefine what ranching meant together. Time to face the challenge. She inhaled deeply, poised on the edge of transformation. But beneath her resolve, an unsettling question lingered: could she break through the barriers that separated their realities before it was too late to turn back? The morning unfolded like a canvas brushed with soft oranges and yellows, the air crisp with the promise of change. As Sarah drove toward the ranch, an unexpected mixture of serenity and tension enveloped her. This was the moment she had meticulously prepared for, yet as each mile marker ticked by, her resolve wavered. She couldn't shake the fear of failure that bubbled just below the surface, a constant reminder of the stakes involved. Arriving at the barn, the familiarity of her surroundings conflicted with the acute awareness of her purpose. She stepped out of the car, her heart thudding uncomfortably in her chest. The ranchers would be arriving soon, and the space felt charged with potential, a truth she could almost taste. Adjusting her strategy, she recalibrated her narrative. Today wouldn't just be about her plans, it had to be about them, their concerns, and their legacy. She had set up the barn to facilitate a collaborative atmosphere, arranging chairs in a circle, with boards showcasing her notes on sustainable practices. The sunlight streaming through the high windows infused the room with warmth, reflecting her commitment. But in the quiet before the meeting, she took a moment to observe her surroundings. Old tools hung on the walls, remnants of traditions that had shaped generations of ranching. She realized how deeply rooted these customs were, and it struck her, her approach would need to articulate respect for their heritage. As the ranchers trickled in, Sarah greeted them with a confidence she didn't fully feel. Their faces were etched with skepticism, but she could see flickers of curiosity. Positioning herself as a peer, she started by inviting them to share stories about their experiences, their fears, and the challenges they faced. This wasn't simply a lecture, it was a dialogue, a partnership waiting to be forged. "What do you fear most about the future of ranching?" she asked, leaning forward as they began to open up, sharing their concerns about market fluctuations and environmental impacts. They spoke of droughts, feed shortages, and the pressure to be profitable while protecting their land. As the layers of hesitation began to peel away, Sarah felt her own fear receding. This wasn't solely about implementing her ideas, it was about blending her knowledge with their reality. With each exchange, she deftly introduced her pilot projects, aligning them with the ranchers' expressed worries. Instead of dictating terms, she invited feedback, employing her scientific training to emphasize how her methods could mitigate their fears. "What if we started with a small section of rotational grazing? It could improve your pasture health while lowering costs," she suggested, her voice steady yet inviting. The atmosphere shifted as one rancher, a woman with decades of experience, spoke up. "You've got my attention, but you have to understand, we've tried new things before." Her tone was cautious, a marker of the history that weighed heavily on all their minds. Sarah nodded, tightening her grip on the material she had practiced presenting. "I understand the hesitation. Change is difficult, especially when what you've always known feels threatened. This is not about dismissing what has been done before. It's about enhancing what you've built." As she continued, a profound realization took root in her heart. Their collective fear mirrored her own fear of the unknown, fear of failure. Only now, she had a shared purpose that connected them. They were no longer ranchers sitting across from a stranger, they were collaborators looking toward a sustainable future. When the meeting slowly transitioned into more brainstorming, the ranchers began to contribute ideas about their operations and challenges. Each suggestion was another thread weaving a tapestry of trust, something she had feared they wouldn't grant her. As the discussion unfolded, Sarah felt an unexpected surge of pride in her role as the facilitator of this exchange, but as the gathering reached its culmination, doubt flickered back into her mind. Would they truly be willing to commit to these changes, not as a contract but as a promise to each other and their land? Just as she began to feel the weight of those uncertainties settle once more, the old rancher who had once nodded in agreement cleared his throat. "I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm willing to see where this goes if you're there to guide us." His words hung in the air, a mixture of hope and caution. With anticipation buzzing like static, Sarah realized her own next step. The journey had only just begun, the challenge now was to prove her worth as a partner, not just an advisor. As they wrapped up their meeting and exchanged hopeful glances, a new question emerged in her mind: how can she sustain this momentum and dispel the shadow of skepticism that still lingered? The answer loomed closer than she had expected, and as she drove home, she could feel the stirring of something deeper within, a determination to rise to the occasion, to forge a path that would truly transform not just the ranch but her own understanding of collaboration. The moment felt electric, balancing on the edge of potential. In the quiet of her thoughts, a challenge crystallized: could she truly rally their convictions and create lasting change together? Days turned to weeks as Sarah O'Brien harnessed all her newfound confidence to push forward, not just for the ranchers but for herself. The initial meeting had sparked a transformative dialogue, and she now aimed to create not just a project but a movement. After months of preparation, she pulled together a consortium of ranchers willing to explore the pilot projects she proposed. Apprehension simmered beneath a veneer of excitement. Each small exchange deepened the trust she had cultivated, and the collaborative spirit that had begun to emerge began to break through the hesitation that had enveloped Sarah. Embedded in her gut was the ironclad resolve of a leader. The first pilot program commenced, implementing rotational grazing on a single section of land, a tangible embodiment of her vision and their hope. As Sarah watched the ranchers actively engaging in the pilot program, a profound sense of accomplishment welled within. They no longer viewed her as the city girl but rather as an ally, someone walking this treacherous path with them. Visions of each rancher's property dotted the horizons, whispering the stories of lineage wrapped in the soil beneath their feet. They were all protectors of their heritage, and she was their custodian of change. Weeks into the project, the ranchers welcomed farmers from neighboring counties to observe, engage, and partake in discussions of sustainability. As she presented data from the pilot, statistics no longer felt like abstract concepts lost in paper, they sprang to life, resonating deeply with the concerns these ranchers had articulated in their initial hesitance. Each smile, each nod signaled a shift, a testament to her journey from uncertainty to mastery. "People are starting to see this differently," one rancher said, his voice tinged with curiosity. Through each presentation and discussion, Sarah demonstrated not just competence but genuine care for the land and the ranching community. This recognition crystallized her identity not simply as a rancher or a daughter but as a friend and collaborator. One chilly evening, amid the glow of lanterns at the barn, Mark leaned against the wall, arms folded, an unexpected smile breaking across his face. "You've built something remarkable here," he noted, nodding at the animated conversations swirling around the room, reflective minds gathering to exchange ideas. Sarah allowed her heart to swell. This room didn't just serve as a meeting space, it was a sanctuary of exploration and accountability. "We've got to keep pushing this," she insisted, her eyes sparkling with ambition. But another rancher broke her reverie, voicing sentiments she had feared. "And what if this doesn't work?" That question, once a piercing blade of self-doubt, now solidified Sarah's resolve. "What we're doing here is about more than just results," she replied, her voice sturdy and resolute. "It's about adapting, learning, and growing together. Every step we take, even if it leads to failure, matters. It builds trust and resilience." And just like that, she proved to herself that her fears couldn't dictate her actions. As time passed, the pilot projects thrived, creating verifiable results that fueled discussions about sustainability in the broader ranching community. Increased water retention, healthier soil, and visible improvements in livestock well-being characterized her initial experiments, concrete markers of progress that gave her and the ranchers faith in their journey, but recognition came from outside their immediate circle as well. A local agricultural magazine featured their initiative, showcasing Sarah as a leader in sustainable ranching practices. As friends and neighbors gathered to celebrate this newfound visibility, a sense of validation washed over Sarah, confirming her role not just as a caretaker of the land but as a pivotal architect of its future. Standing before a crowd of ranchers, old and young alike, she felt the electricity of connection hum in the air while she shared her journey. With gratitude, she acknowledged their trust, drawing from the symbiotic spirit they had built together. "What we've achieved isn't just changing our land, it's changing us," she paused, weighing her words. "And we must nurture this shift together." The applause that followed echoed long after her words dissipated into the evening air. At that moment, overflown with gratitude, she recognized that Sarah O'Brien wasn't just a rancher anymore. She had carved out her own identity, rooted in empowerment, and born of a commitment to preserve not only her father's legacy but foster growth for future generations. The transformation she underwent wasn't merely internal, it rippled outward into the community, a tangible force for positive change. Sarah had achieved what she set out to do. She was no longer tethered to fearful expectations, but instead anchored in the shared victories she had helped cultivate. As she gazed upon her ranch at sunset, sprawling under the colors of promise, she knew within her that she was worthy of success. Her journey was marked by authentic connections and hard-won battles. Determined to maintain this trajectory, she steeled herself for future endeavors, unflinchingly ready to embrace the challenges yet to come. With renewed vigor in her heart, she smiled, knowing she had become an advocate for not just a sustainable ranch, but for herself. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.